Okay, great. Welcome back. We're ready to get going again. I'm really honored to introduce our next speaker. This is Daniela Braga, who is the founder and CEO of Defined AI. So welcome, Daniela.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So my talk today is about bias in AI, which is a hot topic these days. And the clicker. All right. So what is bias? So bias is when algorithms perform results that bring prejudice. And this is very, and in fact, the dangers of that are, according to Megan Smith, they may impact anything from hiring, employment, insurance, housing, credit scores, which translates into further stereotype reinforcement of certain classes of people or groups of people and minorities. And where does AI start? Nothing better than AI itself, to explain it. Please meet my avatar, the synthetic version of myself.
Yeah. Data is the new code in the AI era. AI is as good as the data you feed it, as you can see by the quality of my voice and my synthetic image. I am 100% synthetic, built from 500 phonetically balanced phrases and 15 minutes of video recording. My data is provided by Defined.ai and my algorithms are powered by Microsoft and Synthesia. But data occurs in different points in the pipeline, as we will see next.
So data occurs, so bias occurs in different points of the machine learning pipeline, as you can see, and data is where everything starts. So according to, through this presentation, I'm using a recent research study published in August of this year by Srinivasan and Shander that illustrates very well all the aspects of the machine learning pipeline and where can bias be introduced. Starting with the data part and the sampling part of the data. One of the most typical examples of bias in data happen in facial recognition applications. In 2018, a researcher, Joy Bolamwini, an MIT researcher, published a benchmark comparing the top facial recognition commercial systems, Microsoft, IBM, Facebook, and Amazon. As a matter of fact, I do encourage, and the whole presentation has lots of links. It will be made available. I encourage everyone to go through some or all the links. As a matter of fact, there's a Netflix show, documentary, talking about this study and everything that all the ripple effect of it, called Coded Bias, that I really encourage everyone to watch too, everyone that is really into this bias in AI area. So the results of this benchmark show that every commercial system performs worse, terribly worse, the darker the skin of people are. And in fact, so a lot of the results 2 years later, after all these benchmarks, IBM, Microsoft, Facebook improved their systems, and Amazon eventually banned the use of their Amazon recognition system by the US police, because this was actually getting even more, it took 2 years to get to this point. But it kind of shows how dangerous this can really be in applications that actually mess with people's lives. Facebook is also, another example in this slide shows Facebook also, and it's a 2019 study by the New York Times, where you see that Facebook apologizes after AI puts primates label on videos of black men. Similarly, in 2015, Google search results were rendering black men with gorillas. Same thing. So this just shows how this is a data problem, and it actually unveils why is it a data problem, because the way commercial systems, big tech commercial systems are built, are with data that comes from using free available products that are traditionally used by white men who are early adopters of technology because they have more economic power and more access to technology. Now, we talked about facial recognition, but let's move to voice recognition. In 2020, another research study that actually was, this was based out of a research study that some academics published, benchmarking similarly the top commercial systems, Apple, IBM, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft speech recognition systems against white and black people. And all of them invariably performed much worse within the black communities. And it's the same story. It's a data problem. It comes from how these commercial systems have been using data from users that don't know, that are opting in without knowing they're opting in, that are signing in terms of services that don't know what their data is for. And in the end, you have huge gaps of representation in your data. Speechmatics, for example, so actually in the startup world, you see much more, you see a different approach. You see Speechmatics showing the opposite, saying we do perform better. And it's mostly because startups have access to data in a different way. For example, going through purchases of data that are and not using data that is pushed by usability of clients. Now, the text part. Text, natural language processing, is also affected by bias in AI. Emily Bender is a Washington University professor, very renowned, and she's explaining that not always a large data set is a good data set. And in text, in natural language processing, the numbers, the amount of numbers is important. You got to have large data sets, but oftentimes, what researchers do and data scientists do is scraping the web, which again, the scraping of the available sources are Wikipedia, Reddit, and Twitter, and again, very misrepresented by women and LGBTQ communities. So same problem happens in NLP, and again, a lot of the consequences are especially in hate speech, violent speech, and so on. Now, other types of data other types of bias happen in different phases. So measurement and how do you look at the data is another way. In this example, we talk about healthcare system. And in the healthcare system, this article in 2019 is basically claiming that a lot of the results for healthcare recommendations were saying that white people have should have more access to or should be better covered by health systems and health insurance based out of the history expenditure of the records. So obviously, if the white people have more access and more economic power to go to use healthcare, the history, it's again a problem of, this is a problem of measurement, is how you're looking at your data instead of actually looking at the reality. It's just the people of color have traditionally less access to healthcare because they can't afford it. Another interesting case was with the Apple Card. So Apple, with Goldman Sachs in 2020, launched an Apple Pay card, and this became viral because a software developer who had actually ended up having 350,000 Twitter followers, because both of them, husband and wife, applied to the Apple Card. The wife had even a better credit score, but because of different factors, including income, that were not considered for women, the limit of the credit card was 20 times more for the husband than for the wife. And when she applied back, was denied. So again, this is in the measurement side, is how you're looking at the data. What parameters are you using in the model training that are erroneous? Because you come from assumptions that are at start wrong. Another typical case is the labeling. And the labeling is a very dear matter to us at my company, because we handle a lot of the data. At Defined AI, we do data for AI, precisely. We collect unstructured data. So the structuring or the labeling component is something we have worked. I mean, I've worked in more than a decade, and our company specializes in this area. Interesting enough, now we're going back to the image object recognition and image recognition area. Excavating AI, which I totally recommend you guys to go through. Excavating AI was a research study. It was actually a publication out of a database called Imagenet, which is one of the largest databases where most commercial systems base their object recognition patterns and models, and research as well. So, and what happened was 600,000 images with a person label on it were removed from Imagenet after Excavating AI study came out. And the reason why was that, again, the way the database is being, and it's an open source and academic resource, has been built, is being built with Mechanical Turk labelers, which for those who don't know what it is, it's an Amazon platform that crowdsources labeling, but the way it is set up is really hard to get quality and spam detection and fraud detection. So you end up with tags, which is what what you can see here in the highlights, and you can probably see, but you will have access to these tags associating girls in bikini to sluts, associating children with sunglasses to losers, and the list goes on and on. So with all of, so that's why 600,000 images were removed, but this data is still within most of our the commercial services that are out there in object recognition. Another example is the negative set bias, and the good example for this is the Amazon hiring model. Amazon, with hiring so many people, and it's actually not just Amazon. It turns out that Amazon is in the spotlight all the time. Everybody that is developing HR systems, and this is why HR is one of the areas that organizations like Responsible AI is looking into, financial services, healthcare, and HR, because it touches employability for people. So when Amazon was scraping their resumes that they were using, and in comparison to the criteria that they were looking for, had a huge bias against women. And the reason here is a design problem, and it's the lack of data there, because traditionally, as we all know, the tech sector is highly male-dominated. So it's, again, how you design your model, and what do you do when there's no data? And we have some recommendations in the end, but when you don't have data, there's synthetic data that can be forged, or you just have to wait until there's data. That's the danger of building systems with such negative false representation of the data. Another very interesting example is with the Compass algorithm. The Compass algorithm was an algorithm to predict recidivism in going back to jail. And of course, again, false positives against black people, because mostly only black people were answering to surveys when in jail. And there was no, and actually this was an article that ProPublica, very long article, very, very data scientist accurate article that I totally recommend everybody to read, showing basically unpacking how these algorithms are built and how biased they are from the source. Again, because of representation of either how you look at it, of the parameters, or the data itself. Finally, probably not finally, I have a few more examples, but I'm skipping a few for the sake of time. One very interesting case, the search results, and how search results are affected by bias in the algorithms. So Sophia Noble, it's another author that I totally recommend you guys to read and to search TED Talks and her book, Algorithms of Oppression. She starts, in 2015, she unveils, this book came out in 2017, but it's 6 years of work looking at search results at Google that suddenly became the replacement of libraries. It's the source of knowledge today. And what happened is that because she had the cause of the bias, when you would type black girls, every result or suggestion, which you kind of see it a little bit in the background, would come out with derogative recommendations. It's actually not just for the black girls, it's Asian girls, it's any ethnic girls that are not white. You see anything related to pornography or derogative. So Google fixed it after this book, fixed this part, but it goes everywhere. It's just to see that unfortunately we have to keep all these commercial systems on check, especially when they affect so many people and so many people's knowledge. Another interesting one in the algorithmic bias, influencing in the algorithmic bias is and this is at the level of the analysis and data analysis, is what happened in 2010 and 2012, and I'm sure some of you remember this case, where Facebook impacted the results and the outcomes of elections. And this happened with the fact that humans have a tendency to imitate the people to imitate other humans. Humans imitate other humans. And in Facebook, in social networks, when you see your friends saying, I voted, or I got vaccinated, you have a tendency to follow. So this actually impacted 61 million extra voters that were not expected to come to the elections and change the results of the elections. This is how, this is the power of social media. And I think I'm going to skip a few more examples. And the testing part is actually the final one. I don't have a good example, but anyone who works in data science and in machine learning knows that the way you test your models is very, whenever you have a benchmark or a result of your model, you always have to question, how did you test it? And it's something about, it's just saying my model is better than Y or Z. It comes down to the test set. And the test set, again, goes back to the beginning. How is the test set representing the demographics or the data population that you're looking at? Now, recommendations. I have a few here. The first recommendation has to do with, I'm sorry, am I on the right one? Yes. Has to do with it goes back to when there's not enough representation of data, because you cannot you cannot fake women's credit scores because there's not enough history on that, or because there's not enough women in tech features on it. So if there's not enough in the world, we should wait. We should wait before we model anything. That's honestly what I think. And the other, but if we can replace the gaps with synthetic data, actually there's a Gartner study that I have a little bit down the list that shows that in 2030, most of the AI will be trained by synthetic data. Then synthetic data is actually on the rise. And huge fan of synthetic data. On our human-computer interaction field, it's really rising. There's still a lot of resistance from a lot of data scientists, but I think this is a great way to fill the gaps when data just doesn't exist. The second thing is, since everything starts in data, we should create more marketplaces of trusted data sources, with trusted data sources. I also have a number of marketplaces examples that we have out there. Snowflake, Kaggle. We have our own, and more in different segments of AI are coming up, and marketplaces where community vet the data sets there, and it's just not a biased way of putting them there, is what we see as a trend. The other thing is about international standards for data and biased data sets. It's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do, but it's not impossible. We do it every day at Defined AI when we create test sets or training sets for clients, and actually it makes it much more targeted and accurate and shorter. Governance. The governance goes in two ways. The people who produce data or touch the data part should not be training the models, because it's very easy that the people who are modeling are already influenced or biased towards what type of data they should get. So we should have a separation, almost checks and balances between the people building the data and building the models. And like the former presenter was talking about, diverse teams. It's obvious that if you have a non-diverse, a very homogeneous team, you will only have one way of looking at the reality you're trying to predict. So diverse teams are absolutely mandatory, and but again, the numbers don't help. I have numbers down where you still see 5% of women in AI doing PhDs these days. So this is just extra slides. I am pretty much done. I wanna thank for your attention, open for questions, saying that I have some colleagues here in the audience that can also help answering more questions, and we'll have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Do we have questions? Anyone have a question, would like to come up to the microphone? No? I have one for you while we're waiting for a second.
Absolutely.
Do you know, are there solutions in the market that you would suggest, can help folks when they're looking at biases? You talked about a lot of different things you talked about, but would you say, is there a way to go buy something to help,
Is that, what I was going to say, I have lots of resources here and at each section of the recommendations. The problem here is that the knowledge is very dispersed, and if you're starting in this field, it's hard to navigate it. So this is a good start, honestly, and also a good start is to look at some of these organizations that I mentioned here that are independent, nonprofit, that are non-commercial, that are not the big tech. I'm sorry, where are they? And they're not here. I'm back and forth on this.
They are in your presentation.
They are in my presentation. Yeah. And open source, it was that. So all of these, the nationalists, no, responsible AI, yes. These are the open questions. I'm sorry. Where is it? There's two. Responsible AI is one of them. Okay, these are the organizations. Data and Society, AI New Institute, Partnerships on AI. All of these resources have a much more independent perspective and bring people that are not commercially attached to an employer. There are academics, they're a diverse group of people. I think this is a good place to start if you want to have a complete, unbiased perspective too.
Very good. All right, well, thank you, Daniela. I appreciate your time today and a great speech.
Thank you very much.